What's up, Sam? You shooting something, or? Oh my God.
Get down.
You shot me!
Sam, what are you doing?
You actually shot me!
Hey, no, I'm real sorry. Like, I'm real sorry. I was just getting really into it.
Come on, man!
I promise I did not even know this was loaded. I thought this was like an airsoft thing.
Feeling like a real gun?
Oh, jeez. I thought this was like a T2 thing. Like, look what you made me do.
Wait, have you actually really never seen Terminator 2?
I have never seen Terminator 2. I know the LA River scene. I know so many scenes just because it's like so in the zeitgeist.
It's one of the best written films ever.
My favorite scene from Terminator 2 is when Arnold Schwarzenegger tries to smile.
Maybe you could practice in front of a mirror or something.
This movie came out July 3rd, 1991. In a couple months, this movie will turn 30. This was a very revolutionary visual effects film. I know ILM was hot off the heels of The Abyss just before going into Jurassic Park. This was a testing ground for a lot of new technology.
A few months ago, you guys tackled Tron. That was 40 years ago, right? And I would say like the challenge they faced back in the day, 40 years ago, was just rendering that stuff out. And so by today's standards, everything can render at this point. And so now we're going to a film that's 30 years ago. Theoretically, you're like, oh, well, this is gonna be kind of easy. All of the T-1000 shots where he's just like hanging out and chrome looking, that's kind of a piece of cake. I don't see that as a challenge at all. The challenging stuff in this film are the complexity of the animations now. It's no longer just like a rendering thing. We have liquid, we have like morphing, we have shape shifting, we have these really complicated animation sequences that make this something that just having a better computer doesn't necessarily make this easier to do.
So the shot that really sticks out to me is the moment when the T-1000 approaches the jail bars and like it's nothing, just slips through them. That little touch of just having his gun stuck really drives home that he went through these bars, but that's not normal, you know?
Yeah, it grounds it in reality.
Exactly. There's a couple things going on. One, he approaches it in the previous shot and gets right up next to the bars. And then it cuts away, then it cuts back to him in this static shot where I think there's a few different elements. One, we have the background behind the bars. Two, we have Robert Patrick playing T-1000 right here behind three, the jail bars. And I think there are three separate elements here.
I'd be willing to bet that this is projection mapped onto a 3D model of the actor.
Yeah, you know what, I bet you're right. When we say camera mapping, what that is basically taking the image from the camera and then projecting it onto a 3D model replica of Patrick Stewart. That's not his name, Patrick. Robert Patrick.
This is hard to do.
I bet we can probably do this.
Oh, we can totally do this.
I want to see if we can recreate exactly how they did this using modern methods. So what if you were to do this fully CG and I was to do it with camera mapping?
Let's do it.
And so that way we can sit down and actually compare the pros and cons of each effect, because these days, they would just do your method.
Yep.
They've abandoned the old ways.
Doing 3D scanning is going to be faster. I'd be willing to bet that I'm gonna finish this before you.
But which one will look more real in the end?
Guess we'll have to find out.
You know, thinking about how they did all this stuff like way back in the day, it's like it had to have taken forever. But these days, not only do we have more modern software, we also have modern efficient hardware, like this Loopdeck CT, and I'm gonna tell you about it because it's our sponsor for the day. If you're a creative and you wanna get more into improving your workflow, whether you're a colorist, an editor, a sound designer, a musician, all of those apply with the Loopdeck. So this is actually specifically designed to work with pretty much any software. It has API integration, so the programs actually work directly with the hardware. It's nice. It's aluminum, it feels rugged and built, like I feel like I could throw this in a backpack without ever breaking it. It's got this very satisfying dial. we have a whole bunch of buttons up here. They're touch buttons, and we have a bunch of physical buttons down below. Now, what's actually cool about this is you also have these dials, but these buttons here you can program to be different pages. So you can literally map every single possible action in a program to one of these touch buttons. Their intention, I think, is to replace the entirety of your keyboard with just this. And when I first heard about that, honestly, I was pretty skeptical. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna replace my keyboard. But now that I've actually gotten used to it and have been using it a little bit, I can see it. So it works very well with any Adobe product, Premiere Pro, After Effects. Rotate, rotate, scale up, scale down. Oh, press the button to reset. Press the button to reset the rotate as well. So over here in Cinema 4D, I actually added some of my own custom hotkeys to it. Normally it's a little cumbersome to have to press 4 keys to do an action. Well, it's not cumbersome to program those 4 keys and map them to a single button, and that's what I've done for all of these. Octane settings. I have my Octane settings pulled up. Oh, I'm using some materials and I want to use the node workflow. Boom, node editor right there. That makes me happier than you realize. It's saving me precious seconds that will add up over a day. Meaning, I get more done, you get more done, your client is happy. So if you're a creative and you're looking to, improve your workflow here, we got links in the description, check it out. This thing is actually going to make my life way easier, and I'm definitely gonna be using this for the foreseeable future. So we have been researching how they did not just this shot, but the whole movie. There's an incredibly in-depth article around the entire effects process of this movie from beforesandAfters.com. I highly recommend it, it's linked down below. And the author, Ian, talks about this shot where the dude goes through the jail bar cells. They had to use this software that they made called Make Sticky. That's what they called it.
The software was originally called Make Me Sticky, but I guess people didn't like that, so they changed the name to Make Sticky. Make Sticky, not Mix Sticky. That's an item at McDonald's you can only get after 2 a.m.
Basically, when you have a 3D model, you have a bunch of different points. They're called vertices.
A cube has 8 vertices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So he's describing this process of basically taking the vertices of a model and gluing it to a texture. So as that vertex moves, the texture moves with it. He's literally describing UVW mapping before that was even a thing.
This technology didn't even exist. They were literally like, oh yeah, we had to code that from scratch. The artists were also developers at that time. There was no separation between them.
In fact, T2 was the first movie at ILM. They specifically hired a coder, a developer, to make the tools full time so that the artists could just focus on the art rather than also developing the tools.
It's complex stuff. There aren't tools that are directly built for this exact effect, because it's such a strange and niche effect.
So we're trying to actually replicate the shot, and with that we wanted to replicate the field of view of the camera.
So I basically fed an image of the original shot into this program called F-Spy, which is super cool. Basically, you give it some straight lines in your scene, and then it calculates the focal length of the shot. And then you can bring that information into a 3D package like Blender, which I did here, and use that to model things within the scene to match the shot. And so I used that to make the jail bars.
We are not going to build the bars practically, because what this shot is missing in the original is proper reflections and lighting from him actually passing through it. So technically, our shot should be more realistic in that regard. The goal is to kind of recreate the original shot as close as we can. Obviously, we don't have the same location. We're not going to have the windows with the grates and the light coming through that. Obviously, I'm not as handsome as Sir Patrick Stewart, but we're gonna try to recreate the lighting. So the edge light and the key light are gonna be in the same spot. We're gonna recreate the camera angle. We're gonna digitally recreate the jail bars. So for that to really all work, there's 2 other things we gotta do for the VFX side of things. One, we're gonna get a nice custom HDRI.
Let's grab one of these.
So this is the old school method.
The way they would have done it back then, you can just take a picture of a chrome ball and extract a 360 image from it. And it became standard kit at ILM for decades to come. Yeah, and we don't really do that anymore. I'm just taking manual pictures at different exposures. So I took one at -4 stops. I just took one at -3.5. I'm gonna take another at -3. And I'm just gonna keep doing that until I've got like a dozen different photos at different exposures. And in Photoshop, I'll combine them together into a single HDRI.
So for my version, which is the full CGI version, we have to get a intensely high resolution 3D scan of Wren's noggin. And that's going to entail just having Wren super still while I go around him with the DSLR taking hundreds of pictures of every little nook and cranny and pore and pimple he's got. And then I'm going to feed that to a computer algorithm which uses it to reconstruct the 3D object that you're taking a picture of.
Since you're doing the full scan, you can make me do whatever you want.
Oh yeah, exactly. I can make you do whatever I want.
I think Peter is chewing off a very big bite here. Biting off a big bite to chew. Whatever analogy works best here, insert that. Peter is a big bite to chew. You are going to try to keep the entire part of me CG, and that comes with all of the uphill battles the entire industry has faced for decades in trying to render a photorealistic face.
Here's the thing though, many of those challenges come from trying to move the face, stretch the skin, animate the expressions, but if you just have a still expression, like in this shot, you only need to get the reflections in the subsurf and the hair looking right, and then the computer does the rest of the work.
Whereas, the way I intend to do this shot is going to have all of that baked in. He has to do all of the work to catch up to that point.
You're going to have to do more manual tweaking than I am. I feel like I'm sidestepping all of that manual work and just letting the computer do everything.
And I think that's exactly why most Terminator movies since then have just gone that route.
Yeah.
Like the last couple Terminator movies that came out, pretty much anytime you see any sort of like transformation or whatever, everything about that person or that character is computer generated, including like basically the final finished person. But if you have a low budget or really old, you would do it with the method I'm trying.
If you're really old.
I mean, think about it. The people working on like T2 are like ancient now. They're like grandfathers. I am genuinely curious how this is gonna go down. This is a real, actual investigation between us right now into the old ways of the old guard and the new ways of the new guard. So step one was to get the plate of us actually trying to mimic the original T2 jail bar scene. Filmed the plates, looked all good. I imported all that into Cinema 4D, used it as a background layer, but also we need a photo scan of me for the 3D model interaction. They did that back in the day. They had an actual laser scan of his entire head that they used to actually do all the morphing with. And I'm basically gonna be doing the same thing today, except I'll be using Peter's photo scan of me, but I'm only gonna be using the geometry and not the textures because I will be using my own textures from the footage so that the 3D model matches the real world version of me. And that's where this next step comes in, called camera mapping. Now I essentially just map up the camera here, line up the model, and then I just take this image and project it onto the geometry. But the problem is that when the geometry moves, the projection doesn't move with it. So we need a way to basically stick it to it. And this is the part that has eluded me for a very long time, and it's embarrassingly simple. All you do is right click on your material tag, go down to generate UVW coordinates, boom, done. Now that I've done that, I can actually move this guy around. It's me, but it's textured with the actual texture from the background image. The moment I start whipping it around to the other side, it doesn't look real anymore. Look, it's because it's actually duplicating the texture on the back side of it. Now that I literally know it was as simple as hitting generate UVW coordinates, I can literally open my customized commands and I'm gonna label that as generate new UVWs. I have now mapped that to my loop deck, as easy as that. So now anytime I want to do a projection thing, I can literally like hit the button and I'm good to go. Yeah, so the effect I've actually been trying to get to is how do I distort this mesh here? I can use the grab tool and literally just grab my nose here. Oh man. I can now back this through the poles here. Notice how the jail bars are actually interacting with my face exactly how it would with real geometry. That's the magic of this method. But the challenge I have now is correctly deforming the model as I go through the bars here. Because I actually gotta do the distortion of it frame by frame, and then it's a matter of rendering it out and then recompositing it so that it meshes with the original footage flawlessly. Not gonna lie, this has been a little on the stressful side, and I needed some inspiration. I was about to give up. That is until...
諦めんなお前どうしてそこでやめるんだそこでもう少し頑張ってみろよダメ諦めたら周りのこと思えよ応援してる人たちのこと思ってみろって絶対やってみろ必ず目標達成できるだからこそ Never give up!
Yes! I literally made a macro on this thing that opens a URL launches it in a new browser, and then waits a moment, and then double clicks on the mouse to maximize it to full screen. I could have rickrolled you, but I didn't, because I needed the inspiration to not give up here. I'm hoping to have a finished shot by the end of the day. That's my goal for today. But I might have to hit that button a few more times.
So working with this photo scan has been a bit troublesome. Progress has been slow, but we're working through it. 3D scans have just inherent problems that come with them, like when you try to scan hair, it doesn't really work. It comes in a solid object, and when you try to render that out, it just looks like somebody has a lump of sculpted clay that's painted to look like hair. And so what you have to do is I took the scan of Wren, and I smoothed it out a little bit with a sculpting brush, and then I actually had to smooth over his hair completely and then pat it down into the form of a head. And so now I have this really weird looking model of Wren where he has a smooth over head that's definitely not his head shape. Anyways, for the hair, I used Blender's hair system, and I actually grew out the hair so it looks like one big straight afro. And then I had to ask Wren how he styles his hair, because I have to take this hair pointing in all directions and actually style it to look like Wren's hair. And so in Blender I had to go through with the comb tool, literally, and give him a little haircut. Once I was done with the big hair on the top of his head, I had to add the little tiny hairs, some stubble on his lip and his jawline. I added back in some eyebrows, because, you know, any hair you scan in just is not usable. You gotta create new hair for your skin. And then after that, I added some skin texture, because there are certain properties in CGI that make it look realistic. And you use what are called bump maps and reflection maps in 3D models, which are basically images that tell the computer which parts of the model should be shiny and which parts of the model should be bumpy. And with a 3D scan, you don't get any of that inherently. So you have to make that stuff from scratch. And so basically I had to kind of like paint where the oil would be on his face a little bit, and I had to add some micro bumps for the skin, and that helped a little bit, catching the light and making the skin look a little bit more real. And the last element, that is the cherry on top, is subsurface scattering. That's the thing where you take a flashlight and you shine it through your hands or the back of your ear, and you see the red and the light coming through. It's basically just light entering a surface and scattering around and coming out the other side. And so that's what I added to the face, so the skin doesn't look just like complete plastic. You know, you get some of the light bleeding in. As for the actual distortion of the face going through the bars, I tried something different, which I've never actually tried before. I used a lattice object. It's basically a giant cage, which you bind to your mesh, which is inside of it. And then when you move a part of the cage, it moves the part of the mesh that's closest to that part of the cage. I just went through the sequence, animating these, having it bounce back and jiggle a little bit. That was animated manually. The cool thing about doing it in CG is that you really get the accurate look of the light penetrating the hair and the hair bending around the bars. The downside to this is getting a likeness of a person is very difficult. And I would be staring at my computer screen and I'd be like, yeah, this looks pretty good. And then I would look over at Wren and be like, God damn it, this doesn't look like him at all. And so I just spent a lot of time dialing in that look. But besides that, I'm very happy with how it turned out. And I think it looks pretty sweet.
Okay, we have finished our visual effects shots here. We have finished our pieces to varying levels of quality.
Yeah, it was surprisingly challenging. You'd think that having all this modern tech, it would make it really straightforward, but I guess that's never the case.
It was still very hard.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and look at the actual morph shot that I made last night at 2 a.m.
Damn. Dude, this is the way to do it.
You think so?
Yeah.
So what are your first thoughts when you see this?
This looks amazing. I mean, it's obviously you. A big problem I had with mine was that it looks like a weird uncanny valley version of Wren. I don't think if I was watching this as a viewer and it was part of a movie, I don't think it would faze me. The only thing that's kind of bugging me is you were saying like the keyframed stretching and stuff. It could be animated a little bit smoother, but it totally works.
I have not seen what you've made yet, and I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, this one I'm like simultaneously really happy with this, and also it's like kind of really weird.
Whoa! Oh my God, this has your classic style written all over it.
So I'm really happy with everything in this except your likeness. For starters, it's really hard to create an exact 3D replica of somebody. Like friggin' Star Wars couldn't even do it. It's really tough.
Yeah.
And the problem I was having was that this mesh that I got of your head was so incredibly high resolution that I couldn't even work with it. I had to down-res it a little bit, and that caused some artifacts around your eyes.
It looks like there's a bit of like a geometry bump right over my right bottom eyelid there. So there's a few things that you've done here that really elevated the shot from the original that I didn't do. First, you added some camera motion. The camera's actually pushing in a little bit over the course of the shot. You added some character movement to me, like my eyes are moving, my head's moving a little bit, and on top of that, the actual distortion has ripples to it.
That was tough. It definitely came down to a lot of fidgeting with the animation and the keyframes. It's all keyframed.
The fact that you literally made the hair from scratch is like so high level, and you can really see it there as the hair like literally like bends around, like parting of the winds. That is something neither I or ILM were able to do.
Totally, and it's like this method is far from perfect, but I think that's one aspect that would play into the perfect way to do this.
What would we do differently to combine our powers?
In my opinion, I think we would do it full CG except for the face. For the face, we would use your method, which is the projection mapping onto the face. So then you don't have any weird likeness issues, but you can still get the hair and the simulation and all the nice new technology that we have to use.
So has this given you a bigger appreciation for what they did back in the day?
Definitely. I still have no idea how they did the liquid moving around the bar and reforming. Ours just like stretches back out. It doesn't reform into a mesh.
I feel like the tools they had when doing this shot were specifically capable of doing it the way they did.
Yeah.
And the software we use today is very broad. It's supposed to be able to do everything and anything as opposed to being really good at just this one thing.
Freaking shout out to all the original artists who work on this shot and pioneered software just to make this. And yeah, it was very groundbreaking, and kudos to all of y'all who figured it out.
So for this video, I tried to get in touch with Doug Smythe, I think is his name. He worked on this shot. If you are seeing this, Doug, and you want to chat with us, we would love to have you do a segment about this on Visual Effects Artists React. Hit us up.
Be great.
Well guys, if you liked this video and you want to see more deep dives into older VFX to see how they can be remade with modern technology, leave a comment down below if you think there's a movie that we can recreate an effect from and maybe improve upon it, or maybe discover that, hey, they were geniuses back then.
Yeah, honestly.
It's kind of what happened today.
Okay. Oh! Like, now look at him. Look at him, he's not coming back. Look what you made me do.
Oh! Don't see that every day.
Oh my God.